Hello, Algebra 2 students. I want to greet you. Today is day 3. There might be some of you who can kind of quickly watch this video and count it as good. There might be some of you who want to watch it a few more times and keep on going back. I've had some great questions the last few days. Thanks for your feedback on the way school's been going the last few days. I'm trying to do the best I can and make it be like you're actually in class with me. The way I ask questions, the way I do things. And you guys know that I'm more than willing and wanting to help you guys out. There was a couple people who said, it's so hard because my teachers are not available to me. Guys, I'm sitting at my computer from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, just waiting for people to email me and say, hey, Miss Jabs, I'm having trouble. There's a few people who did that, and I did this Google Hangout classroom. It's like a video chat with them. Only because I don't have an iPhone and I can't use that. But anyway, I would like to have you for your participation points. Oh, this is the other thing. Sorry. There's some of you who have been telling me, Miss Jabs, I was watching the videos. Why am I getting zeros? You must not be listening very closely or something, because I ask you very specifically during the videos to do a certain thing each day. And that's just to kind of make sure you're listening and paying attention, which I know you are because you're getting the homework done. But as you're doing that, just listen to the video because I'll tell you very specifically what I want you to do. Now, because there's been a few of you who have been trying to get a hold of me and maybe you don't know how to use the Google Hangout yet, which is something I'm going to do. We could be like chatting online, we could be video chatting online and things like that. There could be multiple of people at the same time. There might be a day where I try to have a certain class held at a certain time to actually check in with you and see you. But for today's participation point, I would like you to please email me, and all you're going to do is email me the best phone number to get a hold of you. Most likely that's your cell phone number, but that way, like if you're sitting at home working and you're emailing me back and forth and you're really like, hey, Miss Jabs, I want to talk to you, I have a phone number to call you. I can look up a phone number on the RenWeb fax, but usually that's for your mom or your dad or somebody else. It's not your number, and I a lot of times will want to get a hold of you. So if you could please email me your phone number, your cell phone most likely. If it's a home phone or something else like that, I totally understand as well. Maybe just note that in there. But that way, if I'm talking to you and you're like, Miss Jabs, I really need help, I'm able to call you, and or we can figure out how to get on hang time or something like Hangouts, because I'd like to do that as well. But a few good questions that people have come up with, and if you're listening to this and say, I think I already know it, it's fine if you have the homework open in the background and just kind of hear me talk. But how do I know what leg is opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse? That's what I'm getting a lot. How do you know what angle to look at? The problem always tells you what angle to look at, because it either gives you a value in that angle or it's asking for that angle. So again, because you guys emailed me your letters, I picked a few random ones that I have here. I did 3 of the letters, capital letters, as the angles, and then somebody else was the last, the lowercase letters for the side. And part of the reason I'm doing just random letters, sorry, let me hold that up a little again. If you need to hit pause to get the letters, that's fine. Is because I want to have some with information on every part, but then the next time we look at it, we're going to look at, and there's going to be blank parts. So on this triangle, I would never pick angle A. I would never pick angle A in this class for you guys to find sine, cosine, or tangent of angle A, because it's 90 degrees. And when we're looking at this picture, it's hard to say what's opposite of it, because opposite is D, which is the hypotenuse. But then adjacent, there are 2, because remember how I said hypotenuse is the most important word? It's the word we use all the time. These would both be adjacent, and that would be opposite / hypotenuse. So when we work with 90 degrees, it gets a little bit weird. So I would never pick A. But the problem could pick on W or J. And the problem would always tell you which one. Right now, I'm about to tell you which one, just because I'm making it up right now. And since A is the first letter of the we can't pick A. I was thinking in my head, pick the first letter. Since J comes first alphabetically, I'm going to put a box and a star next to J. So we are going to pretend that J is either the one we know, maybe there's a number written right inside here, or maybe J is what we're trying to find. So would you please put a star around J? That is now the important angle for this triangle. I could care less about W. Sorry, W. I now have to base everything around J, but don't forget, A is important because it's the right angle. So let's go straight across from A, and guess what we're gonna write next to the letter B? B is the hypotenuse. That is the first word I would recommend you always write down when you are looking at your sides. Always write down the hypotenuse first, because now you know to never ever write another word along that leg. Now, some people like finding opposite first. Some people like finding adjacent first. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if you're like, oh, Miss Jabs, I find adjacent and then my last leg is just the opposite. Understandable. Oh, I find opposite and then my last leg is just adjacent. I got it, but I'm going to make sure everybody understands. So if you were to kind of put your finger on J, or like since I'm using this marker, if I do this, that is going across, or it's pointing directly to my opposite leg. So next to R, I'm going to write opposite. It's going to kind of fall into my triangle, guys, just the way this one is drawn. So R would be opposite, and then my last word left would be adjacent, so I am going to write that there. However, if I put my finger on angle J, or I'm looking at angle J, there are two legs next to it, and so T is next to, and so T would also be called adjacent by that way. So there's just a reminder how you can find those three legs. Your homework tonight is going to involve both finding the leg and finding the angle. If you are finding the leg, please round to the tenths place. If you are finding the angle, please round to the whole angle. Now, if we are looking at a picture, you should know immediately if we are finding a leg or an angle. And so again, I'm going to write that first. So go ahead and hit pause. If you look at this, X is a side. So we are solving for a side in this problem. And since we're solving for a side, I'm going to round to the tenths place. And that actually also means that one of the numbers in my fraction is going to be something I don't know. So let's use that tip that I just gave you guys a few minutes ago. Where do I know a value in an angle? Very good. At angle 54 degrees at angle L. Now, I know on the homework, they're not labeled with letters and stuff like that. So if you draw it out, if you want to call it, let's say that I'm talking to Promise right now. If I'm talking to Promise and she wants to make that letter P every single time, she can make the angle we're either know or are trying to find, angle P. Okay, so right here is angle L. So that means I need to figure out everything compared to angle L. Again, I can move this down a little bit because K does not matter. So L, well, first of all, again, across from the right angle is your hypotenuse. That's probably always the first one we should write down. And then whatever way you remember better, again, go across from L, go next to L. Our three sides would be labeled this way. But once again, since I am trying to find the hypotenuse, I've got to use one of these ratios, and I know it's kind of off the screen, but I've got to use one of those ratios that would have hypotenuse in it. And because this side is, besides me writing the word adjacent there is nothing important there. So I'm going to kind of scribble that out right now because adjacent does not help me. What ratio uses opposite and hypotenuse? Opposite and hypotenuse is what was in this triangle. Sorry guys, when I was doing that video, it kind of paused for a quick second there, so I might repeat myself a couple times. We can have opposite and hypotenuse in our ratio. Which one of these has opposite and hypotenuse? Oh, it's actually the one, according to my screen, that I can actually see right here. Opposite and hypotenuse would be sine. So on this paper, I'm going to write sine. And I'm going to use L right now because in my picture, it's L. Sine of L equals opposite over hypotenuse. I always like to start out by writing right there and then ask you guys, what does L equal? Yep, it says 54 degrees right there, so I'm going to fill in sine of 54. Opposite, what's my value for opposite? Thank you, 39.5. What's the value? It's kind of a trick written on the hypotenuse. X. Now don't forget, since you are dividing this, that is when we get to do that little swap I've been telling you about. Every single time your unknown is in the denominator, you're going to swap those two values. So it looks like I'm going to pick up your calculator and type in 39.5 divided by sine of 54 degrees. Now, guys, I know when you're working on this, you're working with all sorts of calculators. And I don't want you to get frustrated if you're trying to use your iPhone. iPhones are kind of tricky, but I know how to use them, even though I don't have one. I know how to use all different sorts of calculators to do this. So right now, when I say in your calculator, type in 39.5 divided by the sine of 54, if you are not getting the same answer I'm getting, it's probably only because you're typing it in your calculator wrong, which is not your fault. It's just the calculator is very picky about how you're supposed to enter stuff sometimes. And so if you're not getting, like, that would be a perfect time for me to call you and say, hey, what are you using? Show me how you're doing it so that we know we're getting the same answer. Sorry, long story to say, when you type in 39.5 divided by the sine of 54, no matter what calculator you are using, your answer should say 48.8246. It continues going for a little bit, but we don't care. We only care about a side. I'm going to the tens place. So that 48.8, and that 8 is followed by a 2, so it would stay as an 8. So sorry guys, I'm going to write it right in the middle of my triangle because I've run out of room on this paper. X would equal 48.8. So if you needed help how to find a side, that is an example. It did happen to use sine, S-I-N-E. Sorry, sometimes side and sine sound the same. So that's how you would solve for a side. I'm going to do one more example on this video because you can go back on this video. You can go back to yesterday's video. You can go back to Tuesday's video. The next one I'm going to do, we're going to solve for an angle because, again, that's the two ways the homework shows up, solving for either a side or an angle. So go ahead and hit pause if you need to. So what are we going to put a box around, or what am I going to put a star around on this one because it's the most important angle? Thank you. B is the most important angle. This time we don't know a value for B, but we're trying to find B, so it is important. And this is one where I'm going to tell you it is a little bit more important. On the computer, they don't write letters around the side, so you might want to write a letter there. And again, if I am working with Andre, I might want to always make that letter an A, or whatever letter you choose. Maybe you always want to make it an X because that's something we use a lot in math class. So since I put a star by that, let's label our sides. Go across from the right angle, you always write hypotenuse, okay? I would honestly always recommend writing that number in first, okay? Always write hypotenuse first because that takes that one away and then you know what else is going on. If we look at B, and again, whether you use your finger or maybe your pencil, go across from it like that, that would be opposite. Look at B, right next to it is that one. So we can get opposite and adjacent pretty quickly, hopefully. And if you're not getting those quickly, please don't feel bad. I know it's tricky, and every time you twist or turn a triangle, it looks so different and it gets confusing. So what is pointless to me this time? Opposite, thank you. I'm going to scribble out opposite, but that means I need to pick this up and move it around a little bit because you can't quite see it. So if I'm looking at this, I remember on my triangle right now, could use opposite was pointless. So I'm going to do this right now since this is going to be the last example I do. I'm going to erase cosine because it uses the word opposite. I'm going to erase tangent because it uses the word opposite. And so that means the only one I'm left with would be cosine, and I would have to use adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's write that down first. I'm just going to write down, write down cosine of B, because that's what letter I had written down this time, equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Remember, it always helps me out, I think, to always write that ratio first. Do you know a value for B? So this time we have to leave that as just B then. Do you know a value for your adjacent side? Okay, so you're going to fill in 36.5. Do you know a value for your hypotenuse? All right, when we are solving for the angle, you use the inverse. Guys, this would be one of the times in class I repeat myself about 3 or 4 times, and on about the 3rd or 4th time, I hope you say it. So, when you are solving for the angle, you must use the inverse. If you are going to solve for the angle, when you use your calculator, you better use the inverse. One more time, please help me out. If we're solving for angle B, that means we're trying to find degrees. If I am finding degrees, I have to use the inverse. Thank you. So, in order to get rid of cosine, I would have to write cosine inverse, and mine is right by the edge of my paper, so I'm going to write it a little bit above. Cosine inverse and cosine cancel each other out, but since I wrote cosine inverse on the one side, I'm going to have to write cosine inverse on the other side. And remember, I have to write cosine inverse first. So B is going to equal the cosine inverse of 36.5, over 91.4. And so if I take out my calculator, I got to make sure to hit the inverse button. And I'm going to type in 36.5 divided by 91.4. And my calculator right now is showing me 66.4. You know what though? Remember, degrees go to whole degrees. So I'm going to get 66 degrees. B equals 66 degrees. And guys, if you're using an iPhone to do it this time, it is quite tricky. I know how to do it, but if you're having a lot of trouble, I would recommend either trying to email me, figure out that Hangouts, or go and ask me, hey, Ms. Jabs, I sent you my number. Please give me a call because I'm having trouble. I hope this helps, and all your homework is a combination of both finding sides and angles. So you got to look at the picture and figure out which one you're doing. Hope you guys are doing well.